Well, it's not all Star Wars all the time at the multiplexes. A lot of other big movies are still in theaters and a lot of pretty good options. Now, earlier today, I spoke with columnist Michael Musto about the good, the bad, and the ugly films that are out there. Michael, thanks for a couple. I appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Listen, I obviously don't have to hump Star Wars. It's going to set box office records when it's all said and done. But having already taken the kid and the friends and all the rest, I got to admit, did not disappoint. Would you agree that it was pretty good?
Well, it's definitely striking a chord because it's like a culmination of the Star Wars franchise. This is like Star Wars Greatest Hits as directed by J.J. Abrams. It mixes young characters with some of the old-timers. You get to see your old favorites like Carrie Fisher, Harrison Ford, and for a brief moment, Mark Hamill. I didn't think it was any kind of great classic by any means, but it was entertaining in a rather dopey way.
Well, you know, another film out there that I've heard nothing but good things about and you wouldn't have expected was Creed. And believe it or not, Sly Stallone getting some love from some of the critics who saw it. I think maybe even up for a Golden Globe or something for the performance. But in terms of the Rocky series, it definitely saw its best in the first and maybe second episodes of it. This one, people said, is a very good final chapter. What do you think?
Well, I agree that nothing would have pleased me less than the idea of seeing another Rocky, let alone enjoying it. But I did enjoy it. It's really well done. It does get cliched and corny when it turns out that Rocky is kind of fighting for his life as the young Creed is fighting for the title. But cliches aside, it's well done, and Stallone does deliver a very credible performance. Obviously, he can play Rocky Balboa. We know that. But he seems very relaxed and lived in and very affable in this film.
All right, another handful of films that are out in the theaters now, and for folks who are juggling, if they got to prioritize them, I'll go through them and then tell me at the end which one you'd put at the top. Hateful Eight. I know Tarantino courted a lot of controversy with some of the comments that he made. Police have threatened to boycott the film. But so far, the returns are, if you like Tarantino, you'll like this. A little Usual Suspects aspect to it, albeit set in a cabin a long time ago. What was your take?
It's grindhouse, it's pulp, it's a spaghetti western. It even has music by Ennio Morricone, who used to do the soundtracks for spaghetti westerns. It's 8 hateful people. It lives up to its title, and it's very watchable. It really passed by. And it's nice to see Jennifer Jason Leigh making a comeback in this film and as a voice in an animated film called Anomalisa.
Well, another film without some of the same certain effects or whatever, but it's gotten a lot of praise. You have worked in newsroom long enough in terms of Spotlight and obviously retelling through the eyes of a lot of the Boston Globe journalists at the time about talking about the abuses at the hands of priests in the Archdiocese cover-up as told through the Boston element to this. Did you like the film?
I did. Again, I don't think it's a classic, but I think it probably is the front runner to win the Best Picture Oscar. It's a procedural. It's very methodical in showing how this trio of Boston columnists went about their task of uncovering the pedophilia in the church. And what's also in the story and in the movie is the fact that that newspaper was sitting on the story for several years, and they kind of let it go by the wayside. So they shouldn't be too self-congratulatory about their achievement, but they did end up winning the Pulitzer Prize. And the best thing about Spotlight, which is directed by Tom McCarthy, is the ensemble cast. It's really great acting by Michael Keaton, Mark Ruffalo, Rachel McAdams, Billy Crudup, Liev Schreiber, Stanley Tucci. I mean, it's really all these great theater actors, New York actors, all coming together for a very tight ensemble.
Well, and speaking of an ensemble that might have some familiarity, the movie Joy out right now, again, based on a true story. A lot of the same cast from Silver Linings Playbook, where you'll see, obviously, De Niro and friends that are making a film, albeit this time, about a very dysfunctional family, a woman trying to break through, bringing a product to market. I've heard nothing but good things. You, or were you not as crazy about it?
I do recommend it. It's a very quirky comedy for much of the film, and then it becomes more conventional. And the main problem for me was that it's about a woman who wants to make it, and she makes it. And then there are setbacks, and she has to fight the bad guys all by herself. But basically, it's a very Lifetime movie trajectory. But what makes it different is David O. Russell, the director-writer's perspective on this story. It's the real-life story of Joy Mangano, who sold a special kind of mop on home shopping networks. And Jennifer Lawrence is terrific. De Niro plays her father. Diane Ladd is her encouraging grandmother. It's a really good cast. I don't know. Again, a lot of these movies aren't going to be classics, but they're fun while you're watching them.
And Bradley Cooper also, just like in Silver Linings Playbook, teams up again. Finally, The Big Short. And this, I had thought might have been too dense for a lot of audiences, and the director that was attached to it, known more for comedies than anything else. But again, it's got a really interesting cast here. A lot of guys from comedy, but they say very serious. It was well done. And it actually conveys about what happened and precipitated the crash before '08, as well as anything set to film. You feel the same way?
It's a very intelligent, cracklingly done work. It's a little bit of pseudo Aaron Sorkin, but the public has embraced it so far. So I'm surprised that they're interested in behind the scenes of the housing bubble. And it's really about a bunch of morally ambiguous people. It's not good or bad, no one to root for here, but it's about some people who predicted the crash and cashed in on it. So that makes the whole thing kind of ambiguous, which I kind of like.
Yep.
And it's, again, very good acting. And an interesting gimmick in the film is that they have celebrities like Selena Gomez or Margot Robbie looking at the camera and just explaining things like pyramid schemes and different investor frauds. And that's kind of a cute touch that I think elevates the film.
Now, you mentioned some of the principals involved. I want to go back to some films that aren't in the theaters right now but may deserve a second look. Before I do, anything else in the theaters that people ought to give a look at, given all the choices we laid out here, that are worth a couple hours of their time and $10?
Absolutely. Check out the movie Room. This is a very challenging film. This is no Day in the Park. It's a movie about a mother and her son, brilliantly played by Brie Larson and Jacob Tremblay, in captivity, and that's all I will tell you about it, because it's better to go into this one not knowing anything, and it really will rivet you and grab you by the stomach from the second it starts.
How about Brooklyn?
Brooklyn was a nice movie about an immigrant in the 1950s. Saoirse Ronan is very good in the lead role, and it's all very candy-colored, very nice.
Yeah.
This is not like The Immigrant with Marion Cotillard. Remember that one?
Yep.
Where she was sold into prostitution and all that. This is a nicer story of a girl vying between two men, and which is Mr. Right, and very beautifully done, very sensitive.
I saw an interesting certain movies on people's top 10 lists, and I wonder if they made yours. Mad Max, Fury Road. A lot of people have it there that you wouldn't have expected, and they even acknowledged they wouldn't have thought a reboot of the Mel Gibson film, albeit obviously with much different cast and a different optics to it, would have made it. But it's made it for a whole lot of folks. How about you?
It didn't make my 10 best. I actually walked out, and I know I'm the only one in the entire world that walked out in this movie. People are just going nuts with glee over it. I found it a little too nihilistic, not enough dialogue, human interaction. Charlize Theron was fierce. The car was great. The scenery was terrific. But I just don't get it. But I'm perfectly willing to admit that I'm alone in this.
Well, how about The Martian? Sci-fi been beaten to death here, but people thought it was a smart take on it. They thought Matt Damon did a good job with it. How about you?
It's nice to see Matt Damon in a hit movie. People really responded. He plays an astronaut who gets lost in space. Jessica Chastain to the rescue. And the whole thing is extremely implausible, yet it captivates you, takes you along, and is enjoyable. There's a disco soundtrack, and it's pretty ingenious what the Matt Damon character does to stay alive out in space.
And Black Mass on a totally different track here. Johnny Depp once again getting, I guess, into character in a different look. But nonetheless, they said he painted a pretty frightening version of Whitey Bulger, was a frightening character in his own right.
Yeah, Johnny plays Whitey Bulger, the scary criminal, and another story set in Boston. And Johnny was terrific. And again, people were happy to see him in a role that suited him. This is the same year he came out with Mordecai, which was not quite as well received. So this was a movie with good performances. Joel Edgerton was also terrific. I'm not sure if the sum added up to the, the sum of its parts, but still the parts were really, really excellent.
Terrific. And I appreciate, as always, not just the time here, but the suggestions as well. Have a great what's left of the year. I appreciate the time.
Thanks, Richard.
Coming up next, everybody, we're going to take a look at some local headlines, so please stay with us.